Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to mix scholarly and popular journalism in your sources. Now, this is something that comes up a lot with breaking news when you have something that is very contemporary or something that is falling outside the bounds of what much of scholarly literature tends to focus on, especially if you're dealing with public reactions, if you're dealing with a breaking news story, if you're dealing with a line of thinking of reception studies, if you will, that falls outside of the normal streams of peer-reviewed literature. And especially when you are writing about those things, it is very helpful to track the coverage to see the evolution of the discourse. And for that, you need to refer to the sources. So let's go ahead and let's dive in here and look at our main references here that we're talking about. We're talking about the kind of things that you would be using in something like this assignment from Como 345. To that end, we're going to break down what was originally one objective into three so that we understand separately when we want to use news sources in a scholarly paper written in APA style, when we want to use those sources, how do we cite and reference them? And of course, because it's also a requirement for this assignment, how to reference something like the course text. So let's dive in and take a look at this assignment. So this is coming from Como 345. This is the intercultural communication course. So cultural and ethnic identities in the real world. And this begins with a preamble. The preamble says, the purpose of this assignment is to explore cultural value dimensions, clashes, and misunderstandings. That's an important thing to keep in mind when you are looking for sources later, that the general purpose is to explore not just the theory, but the clashes and the misunderstandings. What can happen when things don't go as smoothly? And it starts with some exercises related to the textbook. And then you're asked to report on those. And so in 50 to 100 words, which isn't a lot, that is a couple sentences, maybe a short paragraph, to assess your cultural value patterns as represented through that. And so this is something where you will be referencing the textbook. Oh, yes, I completed the quick choice items, blah, 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 as described in, and then your citation for the textbook. Second, part two, you're asked to illustrate cultural competence and ethnic identities in action by discussing a social issue. And it notes this should be a topic that has international relevance, so not just limited to the United States, and should be something that is specifically traceable or findable or groundable in issues in another country. So ideally something that it crosses national lines and is not particular to that, but if you have it something that is found in the United States and affecting another country, well, there you have it. Now the length, 250 to 500 words, we often get questions, well, how long is that? And that's going to work out to be roughly 1 to 2 full pages of text. If you're using our template, double spacing, 1-inch margins, 12-point Times New Roman font, around 250 words per page. So that first part, part one, that is going to be roughly a third of a page maximum. And the part two, that's going to be 1 to 2 full pages of text, not counting your references or the cover page. And if we continue through this, we see that you need to include a link to the article that's describing the issue and to reference a number of specific contexts. And make sure you get that number. It's always a shame when you get the paper back and you realize, oh, shoot, I did not do 5, I did 4, and I lost some points. So it's very specific, must have at least 5, but no more than 10. And that is about right for 1 to 2 full pages of text. And so when you are discussing this, you need to apply the concepts from the course reading and what you find in the article identifying the issue, and apply your suggestions to how individuals from the United States should communicate about this. I want to emphasize that because while the issue should be affecting another country besides just the United States, we're talking about what people in the United States should communicate about that. Now, there are some guidance here, like the question, oh, what concept seems most important for individuals to keep in mind? Some discussion and suggestions about sample viewpoints and things like the small to large power distance and so forth. So you're welcome to pick from the concepts, but there are some suggested ones here that I think whenever you see a piece of text written like, you may find this to be valuable, I would treat that as a very strong suggestion saying, hey, you'll have an easier time writing a paper if you do this. It's not saying you must 100%, but it's a very strong suggestion. And so if we add the word counts for parts 1 and 2, then we end up with this 300 to 600 word analysis. So it could be a little bit over a page, page and fifth, or it could be almost 2.5 pages as worth of text. So, that depends on how many examples you choose and how much detail you choose to go into them. But you're getting some strong ballpark instructions. You shouldn't have to pay for any news site. You can access them for free through ACU. We have access to most major newspapers as well as a vast archive. And this note that you're supposed to include in-text citations and a references list, and that you should have a minimum of a article that you are using that describes selected issue, and of course textbook, which there's only one, so it's the one in the syllabus. And I've just highlighted some things on the rubric here. You're getting a very specific list of parameters to get full credit. So make sure that you have your paper coming in within that word limit, that you have at least 5 concepts in there. If you have more than 10, you're probably not going to have enough space to discuss them in sufficient detail. And make sure that you have references to what you learned from the quick checks. So when should you use a news source? I think the best question is to always ask, is it an appropriate source for the statement or statements that you are making? And this goes true of any source. If you're trying to report on something objectively, probably you don't want to use a press release from that organization. There's a strong potential for bias there. So this is one of the reasons why in most of your assignments, you'll be strongly suggested to look at published books and scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles. But sometimes that's not the source that captures what you're looking for. It doesn't have the details that you're looking for. And so you might look for something like, in the case of this sentence, the 2021 Buttergate scandal attracted significant news attention, e.g. Bieber 2021, Van Rosendahl 2022. Now, if you're not familiar with Buttergate, Buttergate was this kind of brief burst of news coverage. Actually, I shouldn't say brief because it was in the news for a couple months. It was a burst of news coverage involving a phenomenon where Canadian consumers noticed that their butter wasn't melting at room temperature and it was a lot harder to spread on toast. And that turned out to be because the cows were getting fed some different things. And so if your statement is that the Buttergate scandal attracted significant news attention, the most direct way to support that claim is to give some examples of the news coverage, which is what the Bieber 2021 and Van Rosendahl 2022 articles are. So in this case, it's an appropriate source to use for that claim because these are news articles that have evidence that's directly supporting the claim because they are examples of that thing. Now, consider this other statement. The 2021 Buttergate scandal was the worst public relations disaster in the history of the Canadian dairy industry. And you have a source there. But take a look at that title, the author name, Mike the Vegan. So that's the name of a YouTube channel. Mike the Vegan is both the channel name and the working professional name of a YouTube personality who opines on various things. And I don't want to besmirch the quality of information that you can get, but in terms of making a claim like the worst public relations disaster, YouTube channels, generally the videos aren't showing all the sources for things. It's not like a scholarly article where we can trace the sources. It's not coming usually from a journalist who has a code of ethics that they follow that includes documentation of sources and such, and with the news organization applying accountability. So it's not the fact that it's a YouTube video, but that it's not coming from a news outlet or a scholarly source that is the concern here. There's certainly times where a YouTube video would be appropriate, and you could be, for example, citing a news broadcast that also appears on YouTube. And so it's not the platform itself, it's who's doing it and what the mechanisms are in place for that. So it is a less appropriate source because it's not a scholarly source appropriate for a claim like the worst public disaster. I'm not saying people in the video might not say something like that, but it's not a great source for backing up the claim and documenting how. And it's not from a news organization, so it would not be appropriate for this assignment in any case. So let's say we've popped over to the New York Times and I search for intercultural communication. By the way, you probably won't see that search box unless you go ahead and first click on that magnifying glass in the upper left corner. So if you search for intercultural communication, you might end up with a source like this. And so our question is, how do we cite that? Well, I'm glad you asked. You could head over to the APA style website and see some examples. You could open up the APA manual, see some examples. Let's take a look at what they have from the APA style website. So here we have an example of first a article that is published online. And so because you're accessing it online, we include the URL there rather than the page number. Now, if you were looking at the page numbers, because you were looking at the printed version, we'd take a look at the second one. Now, sometimes you have a publication that goes to a non-paginated fashion, and that happens. And so sometimes we don't have that information. But in general, if you're looking online, we're going to be looking at the first example here, the Carey one. And you'll note that it's not just the publication year in the reference. It's the publication year followed by a comma, the month, and the day of the month. Now, when it comes to the reference, we have that. But in these parenthetical citations, that's just going to be author, comma, year, or author, parentheses, year, depending on if it's a signal phrase or narrative citation versus a fully parenthetical one. So to take this example here, where we get all that information? Well, first, we want the URL. That's our direct guide there. But we also want to pick out the title, the author name, the publication year, and of course, the name of the publication, the New York Times, that goes in there too. And if you're using a search engine, sometimes it'll attach this results at the end after .html that we can take out because that's just referring to the search process rather than being part of a direct link to the article. It doesn't hurt you to have that in terms of finding that, but because it's not essential to accessing the article, we like to take that out because APA style emphasizes conciseness. So if we do that, we end up with this. Lang, comma, G, so Gretchen, the first name, gets abbreviated to an initial. 2004, January 24. Cross-cultural training, how much difference does it really make? The New York Times, and then the URL. Now, I do want to add something here. Sometimes people will mistakenly include International Herald Tribune, which is basically saying who her employer was. But we're looking at how this was published in the New York Times, so that doesn't get included. The International Herald Tribune is not a co-author. You also want to consider, is the age of the article appropriate for the claim that you're making? So cross-cultural training is certainly very valuable today. Are the insights from 20 years ago entirely current and relevant? I don't know, but it does invite that question. And is it the most current and relevant source to back up the particular argument that you are making? And I would say, in general, you want to look for something more recent especially because so much has changed about internet access, cell phone access, the existence of smartphone apps. I was taking a taxi the other day, and the driver was using Google Translate with speaking into their phone, and it would then do an automatic machine translation into English. It wasn't perfect, but it certainly changed how many people communicate, and also introduces certain potentials for miscommunication because machine translation isn't perfect. And you may not realize that something is not a functionally equivalent meaning if you are relying on the machine translation. Okay, we have just one more source type to cover here, and that's the course text. So this is Ting Tumi and Chung's book. Little trivia: Leva Chung, the second author here, I worked with her at the University of San Diego many years ago. But this is coming from their co-authored Understanding Intercultural Communication and book. Now I've just screenshotted the syllabus here, and you can see I've already crossed out some things that should not go into your references entry. An ISBN number is very handy for ordering the exact edition of the book, but it doesn't go in your reference in APA style, and nor do we want that available through course materials link text at all. Now, let's compare these two, because there are some slight formatting differences that sometimes cause people to lose points. One of the things I want to draw your attention to is that in the syllabus, there is no comma before the ampersand, but in APA style, in the references, you'll always have that comma before the ampersand. So keep that in mind. You'll also notice that in the syllabus, the book title is written in title case, but in APA style in your references list, you want that to be formatted in sentence case. So just be aware of that difference there. And then again, I mentioned we don't include the ISBN after. So when you're citing that, we want to make sure that you have both authors listed, since it's two. If it's one or two authors, you always list all of them. If it's three or more, you immediately abbreviate to first author at all in the parenthetical citations. So, for example, the statement, facial expressions are important nonverbal communications in Russia. Ting Tumi and Chung, 2022. Or according to Ting Tumi and Chung, 2022, cultural shock is blah. So again, it's just author, date. Who wrote it? When was it published? We don't need any of the other information in our main narrative discussion, because the additional information is available in the references list. All right, well, that wraps things up for today. But if you have any additional questions, please feel free to send us an email. You can contact us at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can also head over to our website. We have a blog where we explore different topics. We have many resources for APA and other important things, course paper templates you can download. If you have a particular news format that appears, say, as a video or other thing that we didn't talk about today, we do have examples for that on the Online Writing Center webinars page, as well as on the APA style website. You can see the official guidelines there. If you have a quick question about a reference, feel free to send an email to onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. A lot of students will use that to just get a quick check. Oh, is this how it is? Good. Or if it's not, a quick clarification. And if you have more detailed writing feedback that you're looking for, please feel free to make an appointment with us by going to my.acu.edu under academic resources, selecting Online Writing Center, and then just following the instructions for making an appointment. You can make up to 2 appointments per week. You can sign up for either an email appointment where you schedule a time, upload your paper by that time, we send you feedback within 24 hours, or you can sign up for a Zoom appointment to speak with someone in real time. With that, I'll say thanks for joining us. Have a good night.